I've always seen Season 9 as something of a transitional season for SpongeBob. A season that transitioned the show from the post-first movie era to the post-second movie era, which are two very different eras. One of the main reasons being that the post-second movie era is when the show got weirder with its stories. And while the later seasons do have some good episodes, I always see Season 9 as the last season that truly felt like SpongeBob. And I don't know if that's a popular opinion or not. The second half of Season 9, after Sponge Out of Water, is an era of the show I really enjoy, and have a lot of nostalgia for, and it's the only part of the post-sequel era that truly feels like SpongeBob to me. However, in the second half of Season 9, the show's weirdness was still ramped up a bit, and we got some interesting episode plots. And one of those is what I consider to be one of the show's weirdest episodes, despite it having a very similar plot to many past episodes. So let's take a look at Married to Money. The episode begins with Plankton seeming to have Mr. Krabs trapped using sea bears, that SpongeBob then defeats with pickles and honey, which is something I'm not really a fan of, because they cared enough about continuity to bring back the sea bears, but why not just have SpongeBob run outside and draw an anti-sea bear circle around the Krusty Krab? It would have been just as simple of a way to get rid of them and make a lot more sense than what they went with. In their other appearance, sea bears were not portrayed as the furry buckets of love SpongeBob describes them as. I feel like if Squidward tried to tickle the sea bear in the camping episode, that would have immediately killed him right then and there. The sea bears feel a lot less threatening in this episode. Even when they're angry early in the episode, I still feel like they just look less threatening than the one from the camping episode. Also, SpongeBob says jellyfish honey, even though the equivalent of honey in their universe has always been jelly. This is like if SpongeBob just randomly once said he's feeding Gary cat food. But after the sea bears are gone, there's an extremely non-organic conversation between Mr. Krabs and Plankton. Mr. Krabs complains about Plankton causing him to lose money, and then Plankton says money isn't everything, which causes Mr. Krabs to give this out-of-nowhere emotional speech about how money means everything to him. Which I'm sure Plankton already knows, and he just says that so Plankton can give out his third-grade level insult and say,
"Well, if you love money so much, why don't you marry it?"
Leading to Mr. Krabs saying,
"If I could, I would."
Which is a weird thing to say instead of just throwing Plankton out, because it just sounds kind of pathetic. The next scene begins with them putting emphasis on Mr. Krabs feeling lonely.
Another lonely evening. Dumping trash.
And this moment isn't played for laughs. It's just meant to make us feel for Mr. Krabs, which is an important thing to remember when we get to this episode's ending. Mr. Krabs hears crying, and when he goes over to see who it is, he's met with a living pile of money. Which, first of all, is a weird thing to see and not question, as this is a world of fish and other sea creatures, not anthropomorphic objects. Also, it's difficult to figure out how we're supposed to feel about this romance, because how the scene is written kind of feels like we're supposed to take it seriously. But he immediately just falls in love with her the second he sees that she's a living pile of money. So it seems like that's the only reason he cares about her. But it doesn't seem like we're supposed to take it too seriously, because we pretty quickly see that it is just Plankton in disguise trying to get the formula. In the next scene, they go to Fancy, which leads to a pretty basic scene that you'd expect from an episode like this, as most of it is just goofy shenanigans while Plankton tries to maintain his disguise. We then get a scene where Pearl sees Mr. Krabs kissing a locket and finds out about him being in love with Kashina, which is the name of the pile of money. This scene is also played more for comedy, but also has Pearl acting a lot more like a 6-year-old than a 16-year-old, which has always been a bit weird to me.
I have seen stepmoms in movies, Dad. She'll make me sweep up the cinders, and then she won't let me go to the ball. And then I'll never meet my Prince Charming!
You know, we're gonna have to have another talk about fantasy and reality.
But Kashina and Pearl bond off screen, and then Mr. Krabs proposes to her, who, might I remind you, is Plankton. So Mr. Krabs and Plankton are engaged. Not sure if this is a mistake or not, but the next scene is about Mr. Krabs having SpongeBob plan the wedding, and we see him decorating for it. But at the beginning of this scene, we got an establishing shot of the Krusty Krab, and the exterior was already decorated. Even though the scene was about SpongeBob decorating the Krusty Krab for the wedding. It's a small thing to point out, but I just thought it was interesting. The scene of SpongeBob decorating is pretty fun though. It reminds me of the scene where he decorates in Truth or Square, where he uses a small budget to decorate an entire party, and we see a lot of fun and creative ways of him decorating a party without using money. The song used during it is also one of my favorite background songs in the show, one that always puts me in a good mood. We then cut to the wedding and see their vows. And while Kashina's is just what you'd expect Plankton to say when trying to make something up, Mr. Krabs's has this kind of weirdly sad line.
You came into my life when I thought I'd live the rest of it alone.
Which is another time in this episode when they emphasize that Mr. Krabs apparently feels alone and is sad about that. After a little more of the wedding, we see them go to a hotel called Honeymoon Hotel, which the thought of Mr. Krabs and Plankton going there together is certainly an interesting one. But now that they're married, Plankton asks for the formula, but Mr. Krabs starts to cry because he's never told it to anyone, which leads to the Kashina robot breaking and Mr. Krabs finds out it's Plankton. And it leads to a scene where Mr. Krabs doesn't even attack Plankton because he's sad that this romance was all a lie. And we get this speech from him where he talks about how he's been alone for so long, and how while Kashina wasn't real, his feelings were. And while there is one joke that seems to kind of be pointing out how dumb this story was,
I felt for someone. Well, something. Well, I mean a pile of cash with lips.
most of it is played pretty straight.
Kashina may not have been real, but me feelings were, weren't they?
Get a hold of yourself, Krabs.
Mr. Krabs even asks Plankton if he really felt nothing,
Plankton, are you saying it was all just a scheme to you? You felt nothing?
which this seems like some weird thing hinting that Mr. Krabs has developed feelings for Plankton. I don't think that was the intention, but that's how it came off. Which, is that like a ship people care about or something? Are there Mr. Krabs and Plankton shippers? Wait, don't answer that. I don't think I want to know. Plankton leaves, and then we get this weirdly sad ending for the show. Which isn't like the ending of Spongehenge, where I saw that as a child and didn't get why the episode had such a depressing ending. And I look back on it now, and while I still don't like the ending, or the episode for that matter, I at least get that it is a joke. It's a reference to Planet of the Apes. And while this episode does end on a joke, it is just something thrown in after letting us know that Mr. Krabs is sad and lonely and lost the one chance he thought he had at love. Like, it's not like Mr. Krabs crying here is a goofy joke for them to end the episode on. It just kind of feels like someone on the show was trying to write something more emotional, but then looked at the script and realized, oh crap, I have 20 seconds left. And then just threw in a random joke to end the episode on because they didn't have time to satisfyingly end the story they were trying to tell. Throughout the episode, they emphasize Mr. Krabs' loneliness and then just don't resolve it. The episode just ends with, alright, Plankton failed to steal the formula once again, and Mr. Krabs is back to being sad and lonely. All is right in the world of SpongeBob. Maybe this would have worked better if that sad ending was leading to something, but SpongeBob is an episodic show. This episode wasn't gonna lead to some grand story arc where Mr. Krabs tries to use his big meaty claws to attract mates. The show did later go on to have more of an emphasis on Mr. Krabs' love life, but it wasn't building off of this episode. Instead, in season 10, they just bring back his relationship with Mrs. Puff from 14 years ago, and now him dating Mrs. Puff is just kind of a normal thing. Well, when the show wants it to be. They will just forget about it sometimes to have Mrs. Puff fall in love with a getaway driver, or threaten to beat up Mr. Krabs with a brass knuckle. But most of the time the relationship is there. So I guess it's nice that Mr. Krabs isn't lonely anymore? But overall, this is an episode that has always been weird to me because of its weird tone. It feels stuck between trying to be your usual silly SpongeBob episode and something more dramatic. but just ends up feeling like this goofy SpongeBob episode that has this weirdly sad ending and goes back and forth on whether or not it wants to take its stupid story seriously. The episode sometimes seems like it wants to tell a more dramatic story, despite having a pretty stupid concept, but doesn't end its dramatic story in this episode or later episodes, because even though later on Mr. Krabs has a somewhat consistent relationship with Mrs. Puff, this episode is never brought up again. And I wouldn't call this episode bad. It has a lot of problems and a lot of just weird things about it, but anytime I watch this episode, I'm never bored by it. And I don't know why, but the second half of season 9 does have this unique charm to me. Not saying other eras of the show aren't charming, but this era is charming and nostalgic to me in its own unique way, even though I wasn't really that young when these episodes were coming out. So despite all its flaws, I still find this episode enjoyable, honestly. Also, they never mention a divorce, so Mr. Krabs and Plankton could still be married, and I think that's pretty swell.